It's estimated that 4,000 pubs will close in the UK over the next year.
1 year on from the London Paralympic Games, campaigners say attitudes towards disabled people have failed to improve.
A poll by the disability charity Scope says many disabled people feel they're labelled as scroungers. Some even think their lives have become worse since the Games. You're watching BBC News. The cooperative group has reported pre-tax losses of £559 million in the first 6 months of the year. It's because of heavy losses in its banking arm. Well, it's been struggling with a big deficit in its accounts, and the problems are being blamed on a merger with the Britannia Building Society in 2009. It's also had to abandon a plan to buy more than 30 bank branches from Lloyds. Well, our business correspondent, Ben Thompson, is here with more on this. Ben, why is the co-op doing so well for phone customers?
Yes, if you're after a quicker mobile phone signal.
Well, there we go. Let's just bring you an update on the Syria crisis. Ban Ki-moon has just said that the chemical weapons inspection team have been out for a third day to the site of that alleged chemical attack. They will be leaving Syria by Saturday morning. So the weapons inspector, leaving by Saturday morning, according to Ban Ki-moon in the last few minutes. That's just through on the Reuters news agency.
You're watching BBC News. Coming up in the next few minutes.
9:23. Now, if you don't know what it means to put up your gingham when it's mizzling, then help is at hand.
Yes, it is indeed. One local council in Lincolnshire is concerned that so few people now know the local dialect that they set up special workshops.
Students of the classes will learn that in that region, gingham means umbrella. Do you know that?
I didn't know.
And mizzling is a light sprinkling of rain. I thought mizzling was being misled. Anyway, Colin Patterson has been finding out it's far from the only area of the UK where dialects appear to be dying out. All that to come. Beautiful day yesterday. Is it going to turn into something similar today? Very good morning to you. You're watching BBC News with FIONA Armstrong and me, Tim Wilcox.
The headlines at 9:30. Sport now for full roundup from the BBC Sports Centre. Here's Chris.
Good morning, Fiona. Good morning, Tim.
I couldn't work out.
No, sorry, I was talking... I'm so sorry. We're just discussing something about outside sport, but I think we can go back to sport, having had a problem there.
Back to London.
Chris, thank you very much for our Syrian crisis, because MPs recalled to Westminster will be debating that crisis today and will be voting on the principle of military action.
Labour has indicated it may still not back the government. It's pressing ahead with its own motion calling for compelling evidence that President Assad did use chemical weapons before any military action is taken.
Well, the government is preparing to publish its own legal advice in the next hour on intelligence outlining whether poison gas was fired on civilians in Damascus. Let's join our correspondent Yolande Nell, who's following events in Syria from neighbouring Lebanon. Let's just pick up on those weapons inspectors, because we now know when they're coming out.
Is our World Affairs editor John Simpson. John, this is a very serious situation, but how dangerous is it? Limited, because as one newspaper columnist was saying this morning, you can't be a little bit pregnant, can you? Once you're in, that's it.
Well, we've just had so much experience.
That the Speaker of the Syrian Parliament has written to Mr Bercow, here John Bercow, Speaker of the House of Commons, inviting a parliamentary delegation to Damascus as soon as possible, and bringing their own experts to check UN conclusions. It also says that Syria will sue those responsible in British courts if Britain attacks. It would be an aggressive and unprovoked act of war. What do you make of the strategy here of Bashar al-Assad compared, for example...
You know, setting a tinderbox alight in the Middle East. You think that should be downplayed?
I do.
Thanks for coming in. Thank you. Well, Martin Horwood is a Liberal Democrat MP for Cheltenham, and he joins me live.
Well, I think...
He was opposed to the Iraq war, but he does seem to be, well, not in favour of military action, but he is saying that it wouldn't necessarily mean boots on the ground, it would be short, sharp, and it could be managed. Would you agree with that? Perhaps listening to this may be very nervous hearing you speak, because you're not ruling out some sort of military action. And, you know, I would imagine that some of your core support comes from people who would be totally against this sort of thing. Martin Horwood, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
9:49, you're watching BBC News headlines this morning.
In the US, President Barack Obama says no decision has been made on action, but he believes the Syrian government carried out last week's chemical weapons attack. On the financial markets, this is how shares in Tokyo and Hong Kong ended the session. Quite a bit of green there, that's good news. And in Europe, the trading day is now well underway. The numbers there for London and Frankfurt. Now, 1 year on from the London Paralympic Games, campaigners say attitudes towards disabled people have not improved. Well, let's speak now to Ian McRae. Ian is editor of Disability Now. It's a national website for disabled people. Ian, thank you for coming into the studio. I suppose everybody thought when they watched those wonderful Paralympics last year that things would change, and because people so admired the athletes on the track.
That's right.
Lee Simmons, the swimmer, earlier saying that she had never really experienced any abuse or anything like that, and neither had her friends. Slightly contradict herself. She did say she didn't really mean to say that in the interview, but would you agree with the statement that there is a crisis in living standards for some disabled people?
Definitely. We talk all the time.
It's a world leader in looking after disabled people. Some interesting thoughts there. Ian McRae from Disability Now. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Now, the man responsible for a mass shooting at an American military base in Texas has been sentenced to death. Major Nidal Hassan killed 13 of his fellow soldiers in Fort Hood in 2009.
Well, prosecutors said that Hassan, a convert to Islam, targeted soldiers in revenge for civilian deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq. Alistair Leithhead reports.
You're watching BBC News. Coming up in the next few minutes. Summer's still with us. Let's go across the newsroom and see